All right, when we solve our inequality, we're going to start with the addition or subtraction, then we can do the multiplication or division last. And we're going to keep in mind that if we multiply or divide by a negative value, we're going to have to switch that inequality sign. All right, so let's begin with the subtraction on both sides. And then we'll need to divide both sides. Whoops, need an extra number there. H is greater than or equal to 10.5. So that means the hours needs to be greater than or equal to 10.5. This magician's assistant needs to work 10.5 hours or more in order to save up enough money. Okay, we want to also graph our answer. So you want to start by sketching a number line. Your number line should have arrows on both ends because the number line goes on forever in both directions. We need to sketch something about 10.5. So we need to make sure we include 10.5 and some of the values around it. Marking halfway marks because I know I'm going to have to mark a halfway point. You don't have to number every tick mark, but it should be pretty clear from my number line what each tick mark represents. So I'm going to mark at 10.5, open circle or closed circle. Well, my value is greater than or equal to 10.5, so I can have exactly 10.5 hours. So I would use a closed circle. And then the number of hours needs to be greater than or equal to 10.5. So anything greater than 10.5 would also give us enough money. So we're done. The magician's assistant needs to rope off a rectangle for his most famous trick. The length of the rectangle must be exactly 7.5 feet, but he has at most 24 feet of rope to use. What are the possible widths of the rectangle? So the width of the rectangle is unknown. I always suggest drawing a picture if you're talking about a shape. So we're going to rope off a rectangle. So like this blue line around here is our rope. The length of the rectangle has to be 7.5. The width of the rectangle is unknown. Well, if we're talking about the length of the rope is going all the way around the rectangle. We're talking about the perimeter. So the perimeter has to be at most 24 feet. Well, we're going to need 2 of the lengths and 2 of the widths. And this can be at most 24 feet altogether. At most means that it can be up to 24 feet. Our perimeter can be less than or equal to 24. Okay, so we need to solve. We would start with the addition or subtraction. and then the multiplication or division. Did we multiply, or I guess in this case, did we divide by a negative value? No, we divided by a positive value, so good. We're not going to switch the inequality sign. 9 divided by 2, 4.5, we're measuring in feet. So the width is less than or equal to 4.5 feet. If the width gets greater than 4.5 feet, we're going to run out of rope. We won't have enough perimeter to use all the way around the rectangle. So we want to also graph this. Sketch a number line. You should have arrows on both ends. We're going to graph at 4.5, so I need to make sure 4.5 is included in my number line, but I should include some values around 4.5 as well, just to get a bigger picture of what's going on. Okay, so it can be equal to 4.5, so I'm going to use a closed dot, and the width has to be less than or equal to 4.5. So all the values that are less than or equal to 4.5. This would be a graph of our result. The assistant is making a rectangle with a length of 7.5 feet and has at most 24 feet of rope to use. So the width of the rectangle, which we just found out, is less than or equal to 4.5 feet. Do you think that all values that satisfy the inequality, W, less than or equal to 4.5 feet, are reasonable solutions? So think about all the numbers that are less than or equal to 4.5. Do all of those numbers make sense in this situation? Can you think of any that don't? Well, what about 0? Like 0 is less than 4.5 feet or 4.5. Would it make sense to have a width on your rectangle that's 0? You wouldn't really have a rectangle anymore. What about negative values? Negative 1 is less than or equal to 4.5. That's true, but would it make sense to have a negative length? So it looks like in this situation, only positive values would make sense for the width. We can actually write this in a mathematical way. We would want our width, like we said before, to be less than or equal to 4.5. But we also want our width to be greater than 0. We can kind of bound it in this way, where we're showing that the width is between 0 and 4.5. Can't be equal to 0. That's why I don't have the or equal to symbol here. It wouldn't make sense for the width to be 0, but it could be equal to 4.5. There would be enough rope for that, as we solved in our last problem.
It's time for the final challenge. Let's play One of These Things Is Not Like the Others. 3 of the inequalities below have the same solution. Cross out the inequality that has a different solution.
Okay, so this would be a great point to, again, pause the video. There's 4 problems for you to try out all on your own. Remember to keep in mind that if you multiply or divide by a negative value, you have to flip that inequality sign. That's just something we have to keep in mind about working with inequalities that we never had to think about before working with equations. Like I said, pause the video, try them out, and then you can play the video to check my work. Okay, so on the first one, you should have got y is greater than negative 4.5. You had to do some subtraction on both sides and then some division. On the second one, you should have got y is greater than negative 4.5. We had to start with some subtraction and then do some division on both sides. On the third one, you should have got y is less than negative 4.5, or maybe you left as a fraction, 9 over 2. We started by subtracting 27 from both sides, Then we had to deal with this negative 1/3. We had to divide by negative 1/3 on both sides. Whoops. Whoops. I lost it. Hold on, hold on. Okay, so if you have negative 1/3 y is greater than 1.5. So at this point here, well, negative 1/3 is being multiplied by y, so we'd want to divide both sides by negative 1/3. Well, first off, we're dividing by a negative value, so that means our sign's going to flip. Check it out. They totally did that. And then when you divide by a fraction like 1 and 1/2 divided by negative 1/3, you're really multiplying by the reciprocal. So that's why they're just showing multiply by negative 3. Because that's really what we're doing when we divide by negative 1/3. Okay, on the last one, you should have got y is greater than negative 4.5. We would add to both sides and divide by a negative 2 on both sides. We're dividing by a negative value, so notice that that inequality sign flips. All right. One more problem. All right, I would pause the video, try it, and then see how you did. All right, we always start with the adding or subtracting first. So we'll go ahead and add 8 to both sides. We would want to divide by 4 on both sides. We're only dividing by a positive value, 4. So we don't need to flip that inequality sign. Let's see, we can maybe write this in a better way. 4 goes into 13, 3 whole times, 1 left over out of 4. F is greater than or equal to negative 3 and 1/4. I think that does it for today's lesson.